Of course there are scarcities that happen naturally. There's a disaster, there's a flood, all kinds of things can happen. But here you have a system that artificially creates scarcity so that then you get people who really are fighting for the spoils, and since there's so much control from up on top, it is a way of maintaining the disunity and the confusion of those on bottom.
At the point of view of the corporation, getting more and more, that is driven in part by greed, in part by the dynamic of trying to get profits, capitalism, but it's also driven by fear. Because if you don't do it, if you can't expand faster than the next corporation, they will get research money, and they will get marketing money, and they will beat you and may drive you out of the game.
You're not quite as efficient in this plant as you ought to be by our calculations. This is the banker speaking. And so therefore, we're going to either raise the cost of your credit and drive you to do bad things to your workers or to your community or to the environment in order to boost that return and boost your stock price. And we will lend to you under those terms only.
The nice way of saying it is nice guys finish last. If you're callous to the effects on others, you have a potential to rise. The odds are that you can compete your way up. If you care and are socially concerned about others, you're at a tremendous disadvantage. So I think the competitive dynamic that we have does sort of weed out a set of people for success. But I would say that what it weeds out for success is not competence, not creativity, not intelligence, but callousness.
There isn't that kind of profit motive or interest or any of that in natural systems. It really isn't necessary to have more than you need, unless somehow you're acculturated to that belief system. So there's a kind of scarcity boogie bear in human culture that always has us feeling as if there isn't enough or there's not going to be enough. So we've got to gather as much as we can and store it where no one can get to it and steal it from us or rob us or whatever. And then it doesn't really matter if we even use it.
Most people's experience with money is that money is scarce. And in today's monetary system, it is scarce.
These cultural lies on which our relationship with money rests and is rooted is really governed almost completely by the most insidious and tragic lie, which I believe is the lie of scarcity.
Even the Federal Reserve publications claim that what gives money its value is its scarcity. And this is false. It's not the scarcity that gives money its value. When we're talking about credit money, what gives it value is its ability to requisition whatever you want or need from the marketplace.
We actually swim in a set of unexamined, unconscious beliefs. And we look out into the world and we just fear that there's not enough to go around without any evidence, really. And then we make that true.
The domination model artificially creates scarcity. And that scarcity is one of the ways that the system actually maintains itself. Not only material scarcity, emotional and yes, spiritual scarcity.
I mean, what does it mean to have enough money? I mean, I guess you always want a little more.
There's not enough time. There's not enough money. There's not enough sleep. So it's a constant battle with there's not enough. We don't have enough. It's not enough. I'm not enough. And that is a mindset. It's an unconscious, unexamined mindset that creates distorted behaviors that are inconsistent with who we are.
Ecosystems are based much more on cooperation than they are on competition. We tend to deify cutthroat competition. And there is some competition in nature, but there's much more cooperation.
Species move from competition to cooperation because they discover the economic value of cooperating. It is cheaper, more efficient. All you have to do is look at our Pentagon budget and see that a tiny fraction of it would really develop countries that we've been leveling instead. Very much more cost-effective to make friends of them than it is to keep them as enemies.
8 billion people on the planet. There's 1 billion of those that are happy to work but can't. There are no jobs for them.
Some would argue that these people are unemployed because they lack skills or because they don't want to work. And that may be true in a few cases, but in the vast majority, that's not the reason why they're impoverished. The reason why they're impoverished is because you have this scarcity of money.
We have an economy which is generating only a limited number of good jobs. Are you surprised that parents feel it's really important to teach their kids how to compete on every level? They want their kids to get those jobs. You know, another kind of response would be to get together and say, hey, wait a second, there's a problem with the structure here. But you know, we have a very individualistic response to the problem.
At the time of the Civil War in the United States, which is a very interesting turning point midway in the Industrial Revolution, industrial rebuilding of the United States, slavery in the South was obviously condemned, but the counter-argument was something they called wage slavery. And what did that mean? It meant that you had no protection. You could be fired at will. Without a job, you could be thrown out on the street, and you were a wage slave was the term.
The word job was invented in the industrial age in England. It didn't exist before. And it describes a pile of things that one does for money. Work is a very, very old concept. And work is something you do because you're passionate about, or because you're good at it, or because that's what you love doing. A job is specifically something you do for pay. Pay in national
conditions of duress, you know, that you just couldn't survive except by being a slave. You might sign a contract that says, okay, I'll be your slave. That's by your own free will. I mean, are we going to take that seriously? You know, under some pathological assumptions, I suppose.
We live in an economy which takes 80% of each new generation and educates that 80% to obey orders and to endure boredom, and stifles their creativity, and stifles their capacities, and curtails them. They are systematically crushed by a system which does what? Which fills slots. And 80% of the slots need people who just do rote, tedious, repetitive labor, at least at work, and therefore are acclimated to doing that.
Most of my jobs I've never really liked. I've never said, this is great, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this.
Yeah, there was a job I really, really despised, but the money was really good.
I mean, it wasn't the job that I wanted, you know, and my daily life and my work experience was just not making me happy.
I mean, you could say, you know what, this is a terrible job, I don't want to do it. It's a free market, you have total choice to not show up under these terrible conditions. At the same time, if you don't, little problem here, you're not going to eat, and your family isn't going to eat. And that's why people do it.
Yeah, I really hated that job.
I think many of us nowadays feel the way Charlie Chaplin role modeled long ago, like cogs in wheels, that we're stuck in the machinery of our economy, that we have very little choice. We have to work a 9-to-5 job and watch a little TV and go to bed and do it all over again.
Well, I'm always worried about money.
Well, that was after the divorce. But yeah, $1,000 in debt, and I wasn't 30 yet.
People's absolute standard of living, once they're above poverty, is pretty weakly related to happiness.
I'm going to make a rough claim that about 95% of family feuds, problems, breakdowns, are about money. And I'm probably conservative.
In America, you know, to have $1 million means that you're successful. I mean, but what does that really mean?
Why is that? What's so special about money? Why do we deal about money as basically the breakdown in the family? Why is it so frequent?
Our relationship with money is so troubled and so upsetting, and it is not just for people who are trying to make ends meet or who feel marginalized, but even our global billionaires are completely freaked out about money all the time. So having more money doesn't really resolve these problems we have around money.
There was a domestic violence situation, and I was afraid that I wouldn't have the income.
Wonder where your next meal is going to come from. Pray that everything's going to work out all right.
I always worry about money. Whether I have enough, whether I'm spending too much.
You got to make money. There's just no way around it. And you got to do what you got to do short of illegals.
The money system went global, and it began to disorder every local ecosystem and every local social system on the planet.
At the bottom of all the rules is the rule that making money is always more important than anything else.
Why do we allow societies to be run with this malfunctioning source code?
Part of the difficulty is that very few people think about what money is, where it comes from, how it is created, and how it is controlled.
Well, remember, there has been 150 years of very intense propaganda and indoctrination to try to drive these ideas out of people's heads.
If we could unpack all of this mystification, we'd probably find that economics was made so complicated in order to mystify people, so they could not really figure it all out.
If everybody knew the full facts about how money is issued, how it's put into circulation, who is issuing it, how they have power and control over the economy and over individuals' lives, I think there'd be a lot of very unhappy people around.
It's often been said that money moves the world, or money is the engine of the world, or money makes the world go round, but in more accuracy, money stops the world from going.
I'm afraid that's more than I care to spend.
Money doesn't facilitate. In its current form, it inhibits transaction and trading.
Money is the one thing that is required for economic exchange. It is the Khyber Pass, if you will. It's the channel through which every transaction must go in order to be completed. We live today by exchanging goods and services with one another, and money is the medium that we use to do that. So money actually becomes the controlling element in economics. Those who control money control everything.
Put yourself in a barter situation where you come to market with some good and try to trade it directly for the good you want to go home and consume. So if you come to market with asparagus and you want to go home with plaid shirts, you have to find somebody who is not only selling plaid shirts but wants to be paid in asparagus.
But of course, the problem is you often can't find a trading partner who has the goods you want and wants the goods you have.
An alternative is to think, well, what does this guy selling plaid shirts want?
So what people do is they consider trading not necessarily for what they ultimately desire, but for other intermediate goods that they think may be more readily traded for what they ultimately desire. And at first, different people are experimenting with different indirect exchange strategies.
So somebody may trade for salt, somebody else may be using nails, third person may be using barley.
But what happens is the more certain goods get adopted in these individual efforts, the more attractive their use for the same purpose will seem to other people. Consequently, there can be a snowballing process where eventually a small set of goods, or even just one commodity, seems overwhelmingly more attractive and becomes universally adopted.
And when you reach a commonly accepted medium of exchange, that's when you've got money. So it's not defined by any physical characteristics, it's not defined by any legal sanction, it's defined by this social convention that people will accept it in order to trade it away